Berry Gordy had a vision. Clean, polished, crossover ready. He called it the sound of young America.
Oh, shake, baby. You can shake.
And he meant it. Literally, Motown was built to sell to everybody. White teenagers, black teenagers, suburbia, radio, the suits, the choreography, the charm school. If it wasn't ready for the Ed Sullivan Show, it wasn't getting through the door at Hitsville USA.
That's when you have flat got something, you know. Now let's go.
And that meant one thing: the strange, the raunchy, the bizarre, the downright unhinged. None of it was welcome in Detroit. But here's what Gordy didn't count on. The stuff he wouldn't touch became some of the most extraordinary, most influential, and flat-out unforgettable records in American music history.
Come on over, baby.
Today we're counting down 10 strange R&B novelty records that Berry Gordy would never have signed in a million years. That were too raw, too weird, too loud, too honest, and every single one of them became a hit anyway. Number 10, Bacon Fat. Andre Williams, Epic Records, 1956-57.
Road track. Seen some cotton pickers with them.
Berry Gordy lived in Detroit. Andre Williams lived in Detroit. They were practically neighbors. But these two men were operating in completely different universes. Gordy wanted ballads. He wanted suits. He wanted sophistication.
Glad to see you back, Queen. Got a new dance.
Andre Williams showed up at Fortune Records, a label literally running out of the back of a barbershop.
Sacks on their backs. They said, hey, man.
With a song he'd written while driving to a gig in Tennessee, holding a bacon and egg sandwich in one hand. He called it Bacon Fat.
Tennessee way. I said, hey, man, what?
And here's the thing, it wasn't a song, it was a rap. Williams didn't sing it. He talked over a groove.
Local DJ, name is King, he lived down.
A slow, drawling, half-spoken commentary about a new dance spreading through cotton field workers in the South.
How much?
The Fortune studio engineers thought he was joking, but a Detroit radio DJ named Frantic Ernie Durham happened to be in the studio that day. He heard it, told them it was a hit, and Fortune released it. The song climbed to number 9 on the Billboard R&B chart in 1957. Demand was so high that Fortune sold the master to Epic Records for national distribution. Then Andre Williams walked his way into Motown, not as an artist, but as a songwriter. He co-wrote Stevie Wonder's first major release. He wrote Shake a Tail Feather, covered by Ike and Tina Turner, Ray Charles, and used in the Blues Brothers film. He co-wrote Twine Time, a hit for Alvin Cash and the Crawlers. The man Berry Gordy wouldn't sign turned out to be one of the most important songwriters in Detroit music history. Right under Gordy's nose the whole time. Berry Gordy lived in Detroit. Andre Williams lived in Detroit. They were practically neighbors, but these two men were operating in completely different universes.
Because you're my little.
Gordy wanted ballads. He wanted suits. He wanted sophistication.
You know why?
Andre Williams showed up at Fortune Records, a label literally running out of the back of a barbershop, with a song had written while driving to a gig in Tennessee, holding a bacon and egg sandwich in one hand.
Come on, little pussy.
He called it Bacon Fat. And here's the thing, it wasn't a song, it was a rap. Williams didn't sing it. He talked over a groove. A slow, drawling, half-spoken commentary about a new dance spreading through cotton field workers in the South. The Fortune studio engineers thought he was joking, but a Detroit radio DJ named Frantic Ernie Durham happened to be in the studio that day. He heard it, told them it was a hit, and Fortune released it. The song climbed to number 9 on the Billboard R&B chart in 1957. Demand was so high that Fortune sold the master to Epic Records for national distribution. Then Andre Williams walked his way into Motown. Not as an artist, but as a songwriter. He co-wrote Stevie Wonder's first major release. He wrote Shake a Tail Feather, covered by Ike and Tina Turner, Ray Charles, and used in the Blues Brothers film he co-wrote, Twine Time. A hit for Alvin Cash and the Crawlers. The man Berry Gordy wouldn't sign turned out to be one of the most important songwriters in Detroit music history, right under Gordy's nose the whole time. Number 9, Ain't Got No Home, Clarence Frogman Henry, Argo Records, Chess subsidiary, 1956. In the fall of 1956, a 19-year-old kid from New Orleans walked into Cosimo Matassa's legendary studio. His name was Clarence Henry, and he had a trick. Since high school, Henry had been developing a voice. He used to tease girls, a low, guttural croak produced by inhaling while singing. In the first verse of Ain't Got No Home, he sang as a lonely man with no home. In the second verse, he flipped to a high, girlish falsetto, doing a full impersonation of a woman with no man. And in the third verse, he became a frog, literally in a hit record. Chess Records A&R man Paul Gayton heard Henry doing the bit at a New Orleans club and immediately booked a Matassa session for September 1956. The label put Trouble, Trouble on the A-side. Nobody played it. Local DJ Papa Stoppa flipped the record. Listeners, not knowing the artist's name, not knowing the song title, called the station asking for the Frog Song by the Frogman. The nickname followed Clarence Henry for the rest of his life. Ain't Got No Home climbed to number 3 on the national R&B chart and cracked the pop top 20. It appeared on the Forrest Gump soundtrack. It's been covered dozens of times across 6 decades. And when the Beatles needed an opening act for their 1964 American tour, they personally requested the Frogman. A 19-year-old kid who sang like a frog opened for the most famous band in the world. Berry Gordy would have never allowed a frog voice at Hitsville. His loss was history's gain. Number 8, Work With Me, Annie, Hank Ballard and the Midnighters, Federal Records, 1954. Before there was a Motown, before Berry Gordy had pressed his first record, Hank Ballard walked into Federal Records in Cincinnati and recorded the dirtiest number 1 R&B hit in American history. Give me all my Work With Me, Annie. In the black community of 1954, work wasn't ambiguous. The lyrics weren't subtle, the meaning wasn't hidden. Radio stations banned it immediately. Dick Clark refused to touch it. White stations acted like it didn't exist. And it still spent 7 weeks at #1 on the Billboard R&B chart. 7 weeks. Without airplay, over 1 million copies sold on pure jukebox, play, and word of mouth. The song spawned more than 20 answer records, including Etta James' Roll With Me Henry, which launched Etta James' entire career. Now, here's the kicker. When Hank Ballard wrote a little dance number in 1958 and put it on a B-side that Federal was going to ignore, Dick Clark again refused to promote Ballard directly. So Clark found a different artist to record a cover. That cover version, by Chubby Checker, hit #1, not once, twice in 2 different calendar years. The song was The Twist. Hank Ballard wrote Work With Me Annie. Hank Ballard wrote The Twist, and Berry Gordy signed neither. Baby, she can't work no more. Hank's cousin Florence Ballard became a Supreme, but Hank himself stayed raw, reckless, and completely outside. Everything Gordy was building across town. He is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame class of 1990. #7, Tutti, Frutti, Little Richard, Specialty Records, 1955. September 14th, 1955, J&M Studio, New Orleans. Little Richard Penniman had been recording all day. Nothing was working. Producer Bumps Blackwell was frustrated, so they took a break and walked to the Dewdrop Inn down the street. Richard sat down at the piano bar and started playing a song he'd been doing in clubs for years, a loud, sexually explicit number he called Tutti Frutti, Good Booty. The room exploded. Blackwell saw it immediately. He called local songwriter Dorothy Labastri into the studio. With 15 minutes left on the clock, they cleaned up the lyrics, just barely. And Richard cut the final take, one take. The original lyric, Tutti Frutti, Good Booty. If it don't fit, don't force it. You can grease it, make it easy. They changed it to Tutti Frutti, all Rudy. That was the compromise. The Library of Congress named Tutti Frutti one of the recordings that shaped the entire arc of American rock and roll. It sold 200,000 copies in a week and a half. 22 weeks on the R&B chart, number 17 on the pop chart. David Bowie heard it at 9 years old. He said, "My heart nearly burst with excitement. I had heard God." Little Richard Penniman had been rejected by RCA Records, rejected by Peacock Records. Specialty Records took him and put him in a room with 15 minutes left. Berry Gordy would have never. The volume alone would have cleared the room at Hitsville. But Specialty let Richard be Richard. And that wild, screaming explosion from New Orleans changed what American music was allowed to sound like forever.
She almost drives me crazy. She knows how to love me.
Number 6, I Put a Spell on You. Screamin' J. Hawkins, Okeh Records, 1956. Screamin' J. Hawkins originally wrote I Put a Spell on You as a tender love ballad. That's the truth. That's where it started. In September 1956, Hawkins went into Okeh Records in New York to record his first single. Producer Arnold Maxson listened to the basic track and thought it was too stiff, too polished, too safe, so Maxson ordered in fried chicken, ribs, collard greens, ham hocks, and cases of wine, bourbon scotch, vodka, and gin. He told everyone in the room, "This is not a recording session, this is a party." 45 minutes later, Maxson said, "Let's make a record." What happened next, Jay Hawkins could not tell you. He blacked out completely. 10 days later, a messenger arrived at his door with the test pressing. Hawkins dropped the needle and heard himself screaming, grunting, wailing in a way he didn't know he was capable of.
I know right now.
He had to learn his own song from the recording. Radio stations called it cannibalistic. They said the sounds at the end resembled a man being eaten alive.
I love you.
It was banned from most stations nationwide. It still sold over 1 million copies. Nina Simone covered it. Creedence Clearwater Revival covered it. Annie Lennox performed it at the 2015 Grammy Awards to a standing ovation. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame put it on their list of the 500 songs that shaped rock and roll. Berry Gordy would have shut that session down before the second bottle was opened. And the world would have gotten a love ballad. Instead, accidentally, magnificently, drunkenly, we got a masterpiece.
Don't put me down.
Number 5. Who Do You Love, Bo Diddley? Checker Records, Chess subsidiary, 1956. Bo Diddley was not a man who played by rules, not musical rules, not industry rules, not social rules. He built his own rectangular guitar out of wood with his own hands. He played it with a rhythm so distinctive it became known worldwide as simply the Bo Diddley beat. And in March 1956, he walked into a Chicago studio, Chess Records subsidiary Checker, and recorded one of the strangest 3-minute journeys in the history of American music. Who Do You Love? Diddley had gotten the idea in Kansas City, watching children compete in bragging contests, chanting and trying to out-brag each other in a call and response rhythm. He said later, "It was like an African chant. I wanted words that would suit it." So he wrote a song full of hoodoo imagery, tombstones, rattlesnake whips, a chimney made of human skulls, a coat made of rattlesnake hide. It didn't chart in 1956, but it never died. Ronnie Hawkins covered it. The Doors performed it, lived for years. George Thorogood made it his signature in 1978. Quicksilver messenger service stretched it to 15 minutes. The Rolling Stones treated it like sacred text. Bo Diddley had been turned down by VJ Records before Chess found him. Berry Gordy would have turned him down too. There was no place at Motown for a man who built his own guitar in the shape of a rectangle and wrote songs about chimneys made of human skulls. But history made room for him, and every guitar player who came after knows exactly who they owe. Number 4, Rockin' Robin, Bobby Day, Class Records, 1958.
Rockin' Robin.
The song that kept a songwriter awake at 2 in the morning became one of the most covered records in pop history.
The robin go tweet, tweet, Rockin' Robin. Tweet, tweet.
Here's how it happened. Songwriter Leon Rene had a mockingbird outside his window. The bird woke him up at 2 in the morning, every morning for weeks.
Every little bird in the tall oak tree, the wise old life.
Rene was a university-educated musician who'd previously written the classic ballad, When the Swallows Come Back to Capistrano. He turned his nocturnal frustration into a novelty record.
A pretty little raven that the birdman sang, talking like a truth.
He thought so little of the finished song that he refused to put his real name on it. He used the pseudonym Jimmy Thomas. He brought it to Bobby Day.
Song, all the little birds on Jaybird Street love to.
And La R&B singer, whose real last name was magnificently Bird Day, recorded it with session musician Barney Kessel on guitar and the legendary Earl Palmer on drums.
When this was grand, they started going steady and bless my soul.
Class Records released it in June 1958. Dick Clark started playing it on the daytime television show. The song skyrocketed.
I'm bopping and I'm singing this song, all the little birds on J.
Rockin' Robin hit number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 and spent 1 week at number 1 on the R&B chart. Over 1 million copies. Gold record. Then in 1972, 14 years later, a 13-year-old from Gary, Indiana, recorded his own version as his second solo single. His name was Michael Jackson. His version also peaked at number 2. Bobby Day's last name was Bird. The song was about a bird, written by a man who couldn't sleep because of a bird. Berry Gordy passed on Bobby Day. Then 14 years later, Gordy's own label, with Gordy's own artist, had to go back and cover the song Gordy missed. The irony is beautiful. Number 3. Papa Umo, The Rivens, Liberty Records, 1962. There is a story, possibly true, that the hook for Papa Umo was born inside a jail cell. Bass singer Turner. Rocky Wilson Jr. reportedly heard a fellow inmate chanting something close to it and brought the phrase back to the group when he got out. True or not? What's undeniable is that the Rivingtons walked into Radio Recorder's studio in Hollywood in February 1962 with a song built almost entirely of nonsense syllables and came out with one of the most infectious records ever pressed to vinyl. These were not amateurs. Under different names, the Lamplighters, the Sharps, the Crenshaws. These 4 men had been recording R&B since 1954. They'd backed Thurston Harris on Little Bitty Pretty One. They'd appeared on Dwayne Eddy's Rebel Rouser. They were professionals. And they used every bit of that experience to make 48 words of pure gibberish sound like the most important thing you'd ever heard. Papa Umo hit number 48 on the Hot 100. Modest. But then a garage band from Minneapolis called the Trashmen mashed it together with the Rivingtons' follow-up, The Bird's the Word, cranked up the tempo until it almost fell apart, and released Surfin' Bird in 1963. That hit number 4. The Trashmen didn't credit the Rivingtons initially. Lawyers fixed that quickly. And the royalties from Surfin' Bird, used in films, TV shows, and commercials for 6 decades, kept paying the Rivingtons long after they stopped performing. Berry Gordy didn't want nonsense syllables at Motown, so the Rivingtons gave those syllables to the world instead. Number 2, Fannie Mae, Buster Brown. Fire Records, 1959. In the summer of 1959, a man walked into Bell Sound Studios in New York and recorded his first ever professional record. He was 47 years old. He walked with a limp. He played harmonica. He was from Newton, Georgia. His name was Buster Brown. Fire Records boss Bobby Robinson had found Brown after he moved to New York in the mid-1950s. Brown had been performing Fannie Mae in local clubs since at least 1955. A Texas music poster from that year advertised it at one of his shows, but he'd never made a professional recording. Robinson booked the session. The musicians hit such a great groove during rehearsal that Robinson was afraid to let them stop. He called Bell Sound immediately and booked studio time on the spot. That same night, moving the session from the rehearsal hall direct to the studio without letting anyone rest. All music called Fannie Mae, one of the most undiluted blues records to ever make the top 40. It climbed to number 1 on the R&B chart in April 1960. It hit number 38 on the pop chart. The Rolling Stones were inspired by it. Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys has said the track's rhythm was the foundation behind Help Me Rhonda. George Lucas put it on the American Graffiti soundtrack in 1973. Buster Brown waited until he was 47 years old to record his first professional song, and it went to number 1. Berry Gordy built Motown for young, polished talent. Sometimes the greatest music comes from the man who just waited until the world was finally ready to hear him. Number 1, Whole Lotta Shockin' Going On, Jerry Lee Lewis. Sun Records, 1957. There is a moment in 1957 that changed American music.
Yeah, come on over, baby. We got
Jerry Lee Lewis, 21 years old, raised on gospel and sin in Faraday, Louisiana, performed Whole Lotta Shakin' Going On the Steve Allen Show in front of a national television audience.
We got the bull by the horn. Oh.
He played the piano like he was trying to break it. He stood up mid-song. He kicked the bench across the stage. The studio audience, mostly teenagers, went completely insane. The song had been written by Dave Williams in 1951. Big Maybelle recorded it. Roy Hall recorded it. Neither version moved anybody.
A lot of shaking going on. Easy now, shake.
Then Sun Records producer Jack Clement convinced Sam Phillips to let Jerry Lee cut it. Lewis recorded it on February 27, 1957. Phillips almost didn't release it. He thought it was too wild, too unhinged, too much. It came out anyway. Within weeks, it had sold 100,000 copies. By summer, it was selling 30,000 copies per day.
All you gotta do, honey.
It hit #1 on the pop chart, #1 on the country chart, #1 on the R&B chart, 3 charts simultaneously. Berry Gordy's philosophy was that black music needed to be refined and polished to earn crossover radio play. Jerry Lee Lewis proved you could go the other direction entirely. Take wild, reckless, southern fried, barely controlled chaos, and the whole country would come running. No choreography, no charm school, no sequence, just a piano player kicking his bench across a stage and playing like the room was on fire. Whole lot of shocking going on. The record Berry Gordy could never have imagined signing, the one the world never forgot.